Welcome to the Flower Lounge, a place for conversations with wildly creative people and a little plant-loving wisdom to help you experience life in full bloom. I'm Katie Hess, flower alchemist and founder of LOTUSWEI, and I believe in a world where we're all living at our personal edge. Welcome to this week's episode of the Flower Lounge. It's going to be a great episode. We have with us returning because her episode was so popular and we have so much information to dive into. Erin Borbet is a transformational health coach and herbalist. And after 7 years in private acupuncture practice in New York City, Erin now works remotely with women all over the world to resolve hormonal symptoms and nourish fertility. She has her master's in science in Chinese medicine, clinical experience working in renowned hospitals like NYU Medical Center, the New York VA Hospital, and Zhejiang Hospital in China, the Berkley Center for Reproductive Wellness in New York, Planned Parenthood in San Diego, and the Lutheran Medical Center in Brooklyn. Obviously, she has a ton of experience, and she uses her 15 years of clinical experience now to provide her clients with a comprehensive holistic health strategy and effective natural solutions. And it's her belief that true and lasting healing must also integrate emotional and spiritual aspects, which she addresses with consistent coaching calls. She did just open an acupuncture clinic in Victor, Idaho, and she does in-person house calls in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, beautiful place to live, and pop-up clinics in New York City a few times a year. And I'm just going to throw this in there. If you get really excited about her information today, which I'm sure you will, she has a complimentary 30-minute call. So if you go to her website, which is Erin Borbet, and the last name is spelled BORBET.com, you'll see a Work With Me tab. So we have some interesting things to dive into today. Thank you so much for being with us, Erin.
Yes, thanks for having me again. It's great. Such a pleasure.
You're such a fountain of good information. And I know we had a lot of requests for people to really look at Chinese medicine understanding of the menstrual cycle and get into all things hormonal with you. So where should we start?
Where should we start? Well, I feel like, gosh, there's so many ways the, menstrual cycle hormonal imbalance can present, right? From like, the bucket list of PMS symptoms, like acne and headaches and mood swings, and people will sometimes experience a depressed immune system, so like they're getting a cold as a premenstrual symptom. There's so many things.
What's the difference between how Chinese medicine sees the cycle versus how Western medicine sees the cycle?
Well, let me see where to start there. So Chinese medicine so when we look at what's normal with the menstrual cycle, Chinese medicine would view a normal presentation being that you have moderate bleeding. So this would be like, a medium flow for 5 to 7 days, every 28 to 32 days. There can be a minimal amount of cramping, which we would kind of, associate with more like a sensation versus like debilitating pain or pain that affects your daily activities and things. So that's what Chinese medicine considers normal. And anything else, any other symptoms that are associated with the menstrual cycle are considered signs of imbalance, which could be due to, there are many things that could be due to in Chinese medicine, but the 4 main ones are deficiency, excess, heat, or cold. So we would look at the individual to really kind of, decipher what is their pattern going on, and then how can we facilitate it so that the symptoms can improve and they can go to this, more, symptom-free, menstrual cycle. And, Western medicine has a more reductionist approach to it, and less curiosity about the meaning behind the symptoms. So for example, like if you go to your doctor with painful periods or irregular periods or, PMS, it's likely that their, recommendation will be something like birth control pill for everyone that would reduce those
Oh
symptoms
no.
or eliminate them, right? Oh no.
Oh no.
But that's the typical, approach. They don't have another paradigm to think in, like, well, how could we get these, why are you having this symptom and how can we reverse that, right? But we can take away the symptom by taking away your cycle, essentially. So let's do that and see.
So if you have pain in your arm, we'll just cut off your arm. No
Right.
problem.
Yes. Yes. Or give you, prescription pain relievers for the rest of your life or something. I don't, it's certainly not a treatment method. And it's been very much marketed as such, meaning that a lot of my clients, myself included, at one point when I was on the birth control pill many years ago,
Yeah.
It's given to us as a way to regulate the cycle, right? And so if you're having these irregular symptoms, this will regulate it, but it's not doing that at all.
Let's just get into that for a second before we move on to all the juicy stuff. I also was on the pill from like age 16 to, it's like a teen thing. And, it actually culminated at one point in a small like breast tumor that was, I was able to just like get rid of it naturally through detox baths and stuff like that and getting off the pill. But for people who maybe haven't heard of the research, what's the problem with the pill? Like, what's the deal? Like, why are so many women getting off of it in droves?
Well, there are lots of problems with it, and there are a lot more risks than are disclosed. There may be disclosed in the little packet that nobody reads that comes, at the bottom of your prescription bag, but not certainly in the room with the prescribing doctor. But it's so many things. One main one being that it completely takes away your cycle. So it shuts down your ovaries, it shuts down the what we call the HPA axis. So that's the pituitary hypothalamus ovarian axis. That's what, causes your menstrual cycle every month. So it just kind of puts that to sleep.
Why is the cycle so important for women? Why is it so important for us to have it?
Well, it's important for us because it's part of our natural rhythm. And we, Chinese medicine certainly, and myself, believe that the body, is created wise and that there is a wisdom to all of our functions, including the menstrual function. And so this cascade of hormones, the follicular hormones and the progesterone and the estrogen that, just have this dance throughout the month is crucial to our well-being. There are many ways we can look at it as far as like, I think it's crucial as women to our, emotional and spiritual health. I think it's directly linked to our intuitive wisdom. And so the more we are in tune with our menstrual cycles, the more, power we have in that way. But also just from a physiological standpoint, it is an important aspect to us that should be regulated, right? We should be able to get that back into balance. And if it's out of balance, then we need to listen to that signal from our body as like a sign, as like a warning sign. Let's figure this out, because if we don't, then potentially something more dramatic could be coming down the pipeline.
I always heard from, and I'm sure there isn't any research done on this clinical double-blind studies, but I had always heard from, flower essence teachers and folks in energetic medicine that the cycle is a really powerful way for women to, it's almost like detox the energetic saturation that we've built up or absorbed. So it's like this really helpful way to cleanse the body of anything that's been accumulated. And I can imagine that if that's true, that if you don't have the opportunity to do that, something would build up or stagnancies would build up. Do you think, does Chinese medicine support that theory?
Yes, I would say yes. Like, and that there's more of a release than just like a blood release, right? But that at the time of the month. And I think that's where, we can tap into that more psycho-emotional, psycho-spiritual aspect associated with the menstrual cycle as being a source of our power. That said, the menstrual cycle in and of itself, isn't crucial to our survival, right? Like if we're looking at what we need to like stay alive, it's often the first thing to kind of get disrupted, I see in my practice for
Mm-hmm.
sure. Like a lot of my clients who come to me with either irregular periods or absent periods for 3 months or more, which we consider, moving into an amenorrhea type presentation,
Mm-hmm.
that, there is likely some deeper imbalance going on that we need to address, and the body has decided to spend its energy trying to work on that, and so it stopped the menstrual cycle, which we can look at as actually a really wise choice, right? So it seems like my body's not doing what it's supposed to and it's broken, but maybe it's spending time elsewhere where there's a real need, and let's go help it so that you can come back to balance and then have a menstrual cycle again. So that's not always the case of amenorrhea, but it's often the case that I see. So
I loved what you said about Chinese medicine practitioners having curiosity, the curiosity behind the symptoms. How does that play out with your clients? Like, what kinds of questions, what should we be asking ourselves in terms of our cycles to know what's so-called normal or not normal?
Well, I think I love recommending like journals for women, like whether it's daily or weekly, but throughout the cycle, and really just taking note of how you feel physically, emotionally, mentally, and then maybe going back and taking a look at that. And, not that all of your experiences are going to be hormonal, but are there themes, are there patterns? And if we notice these popping up at certain phases of the cycle, can we harness that, and use that energy as, as a way to inform your life and inform your choices? And also, if there are discomforts or symptoms within those kind of emotional, physical categories, then we can start to see the pattern and work with, well, maybe what's the cause behind that. So I just think the more questions you can ask about everything that's coming up in your, physical, emotional health, and then also taking note so that you can really go back and evaluate. Those are like my number one tools for just getting to know. You don't have to know the why, but the curiosity often develops either the why, or the why doesn't matter anymore, right?
So you're basically saying that anything other than just like a slight sensation or very minimal cramping is abnormal. So like big mood swings and PMS, and I have to stay home because my period hurts so much and I have to take aspirin or Tylenol or whatever, or no periods, or that's all an indicator of a deeper imbalance. And do you find that it's typically in the reproductive hormonal system that the imbalance lies, or it's somewhere else in the body, or both? Or it's just all connected?
Yeah, it's all connected. But you're right. But that's right. Any of those are imbalanced. And I was reading an article recently that said that upwards of 50% of menstruating women experience painful periods that incapacitate them for 1 to 2 days. So this means they have to take off work. They can't leave the couch. This is every month. Almost half of the women. This is like a big deal.
I know.
It shouldn't be happening.
I know. I had never heard of this type of thing until, I started working with my team and having lots of women on my team and noticed that it was really prevalent. I mean, aside from a little bloating, like I didn't really know, like, I guess I have it easy. So I began to see as I got older that this was like actually really a common thing. Super
it's
common.
Really common. Yeah.
It's wild.
Yeah, it's really common. And there are no remedies for it from a Western standpoint, other than taking away your cycle or, managing with pain medications, which sometimes aren't even enough for women that have really severe pain. So,
and I can imagine that if you are, say, in your early 20s and you're already used to the fact that half of the women in your class or school are having these symptomologies, that it's perhaps quote unquote normal.
Yes, quote unquote, part of being a woman, right? Like what we get to enjoy or endure, right? Lucky us. But that's not true. But you're right. We have kind of developed this social, consciousness about our menstrual cycles, that they make us crazy. They make us, in pain. They make us irritable to everyone around us, and everyone should just kind of like, stand off for those few days a month that it comes. And we should just prepare for that. And is just so not the case. I would like that consciousness to shift.
Right. Yeah, that seems really bizarre to me too.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say a client comes in and has super painful periods. What kind of things are you going to take a look at? What are the causes of that?
Yeah. So there are a few causes. So obviously, like I said, from Chinese medicine, we're going to try to differentiate the pattern, but I'm also, always curious kind of what the physiological kind of Western medicine is behind it. There's, primary dysmenorrhea, which is, pelvic pain essentially, or menstrual pain. And that can be that means it's just your cycle that's causing that pain. So whatever happening in your hormonal, rhythm, something is stuck somewhere and leading to this pain, but there is no underlying pathology or, disorder, or physical imbalance that, from a Western medicine standpoint, that needs to be treated. The secondary type is due to this physical imbalance. So this doesn't mean that we can't work with it from a natural perspective, but I do think it's always worth, making sure that one of these underlying causes isn't also a contributing factor to the painful period. So this could be something like endometriosis, which is endometrial lining, which is the lining that should be in the uterus, and it grows outside the uterus. So, this is a disorder that, is important to know about if it's going on, or if there's ovarian cysts or polycystic ovarian syndrome, uterine fibroids. Also just an infection, like either a sexually transmitted infection or pelvic inflammatory disease. So these are all important things to just rule out when I have a client come in with that. And obviously I'm not diagnosing these things, but I'm looking for, markers and, having them work with their physician to get that going. The great news is that whatever the cause, whether it's, primary, there's no pathology, or one of these pathological symptoms aside from, a pelvic infection, they will all respond to anti-inflammatory treatment, right? It's basically inflammation that's happening. And so we want to reduce that and cool that off. And a major way we do that is through diet, for sure. And then also herbs and supplements, which we'll get into how to cool that inflammation. But without getting too technical, the kind of component behind the actual cramping are these like hormonal substances called prostaglandins, which are circulating throughout your system all the time. And they are pro-inflammatory, which, inflammation is helpful in certain situations in the body. We need that for fighting off disease and things. And then there are also anti-inflammatory ones. So these are responsible for the causation of uterine contractions. So their ratio can also be dependent on how much a person experiences cramping based on how severely their uterus is contracting, right? So if these prostaglandins are out of balance and there's too many of the inflammatory ones, this can absolutely be a cause of excessive uterine cramping and therefore pain. So we want to reduce the inflammation, rebalance the whole hormonal response, but especially this prostaglandin response, and then get things to smooth out.
And when you talk about inflammation, I mean, because that's such a buzzword these days, like, is it related to inflammation from, oh shoot, now I can't eat dairy anymore, or I can't eat gluten anymore because it's creating inflammation in my body, something like that. So is that type of inflammation related to pelvic inflammation?
Yes, it's all related. So yeah, like we, I'm always working with the gut and making sure that that's healthy, because we need to make sure that the gut lining is healed and there is no leaking of inflammatory agents, and that also the nutrients that we want in the bloodstream are properly absorbing. So, we can have the perfect diet and the perfect herbs, but if they're not processed in the right way and we're not absorbing them, then they're not helping us. So absolutely, we have to look at the whole at the whole picture. And it usually starts with the state of the digestive system.
So I could work with a practitioner like you and get the perfect diet for my body and get the perfect set of herbs to take. And if my stomach lining isn't receptive, it's not going to work as well. So then you have to dial it back even further.
Yeah. Or it could just take longer. Yes. Yeah. Like healing the gut lining first is the fastest way.
And what do you recommend for that? Like bone broths and probiotics?
Yeah. And collagen and things. And then depending on the level of inflammation, it could be a certain amount of elimination diet. So like those foods you mentioned, like the common triggers, so gluten and dairy are big ones, sugar, even soy and eggs and things. So it just depends on the presentation of the person, how clean their lifestyle has been this far, what their history is. I mean, a lot of what I think is so fascinating, a lot of this like prostaglandin response is the imbalance comes from an unbalanced ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acids, right? You've heard of these, right?
Oh my gosh.
Which a lot of us are products of when the omega-6, so these are in like refined oils in super high amounts, right? Like canola oils, cottonseed oils, safflower oils, even grapeseed oil, which has gotten this like somewhat healthy whatever verification, but it's really not. Margarine, all of that happened in the 80s and 90s and even 70s to some extent. So how much of that was consumed, maybe even we're not eating that way now, but maybe we did for the first 20 years of our life as our hormones were developing. So we have to take that into consideration. Maybe our mother was eating that while she was pregnant with us, and all of that seeps through as part of our imprints, via the placenta, right? So it's all, we have to kind of look at before. I don't just recommend everybody do crazy elimination diets, but what is their toxic load, so to speak, right? And how far is the imbalance, and then how can we bring it back?
Yeah, I've been wondering about omega-3s lately because I see this trend lately, like literally just in the past few weeks, of there being sort of a lack of mental clarity in everyone around me, like in everyone I see, basically. And I'm like, what is causing that? And I started thinking about omega-3s, like, wow, we really I should just bring some fish oil to the office. And sources for that would be like fish oils, evening primrose, flaxseed. I mean, how often do we get those in our diet? Not very often, unless we're eating sardines or.
Yeah, which would be great to eat them
because I was going to ask you, when you work with people individually, you said you look at deficiency, excess, heat, and cold, but I was also curious about these sort of overarching broad themes that it might be, for example, like this, like let's say all of us are deficient in omega-3s. That's a possibility, right?
Totally a possibility, especially if our omega-6s are out of whack. That's when like, so you want those, so omega-6s are good for you too, but we just get them too much, and we need them on like a 1-to-1 ratio in our body. So if we're getting like too high of omega-6 and too low of omega-3, that is just like causing a lot of inflammation in the body, right? So increasing that omega-3 and decreasing the omega-6 will not only reduce the inflammation, but it will improve that like cognitive function, because that's where the omega-3 comes from. And with fish oil specifically, so like you were talking about like small fish, anchovies, sardines, mackerel, but also, larger fish like salmon are pretty rich in omega-3s, but you'll get the essential fatty acids, the DHA and the EPA, which is good for the brain function. My favorite, if you're able to like eat those things every day, great. I like to bring a can of sardines to the office, but I need to eat it alone, right? I can't do it when there are clients in there because it's really smelly, so you have to kind of evaluate how these can fit into your life. Maybe you guys could have sardine day and then you'll all smell or something, but I'm a food first person. But I love, love, love cod liver oil. It is my favorite supplement for women. Really, any brand out there is fine.
As long as they're testing for heavy metals.
As long as it's a reputable brand. I have my favorites for sure. But because you're getting all that good fish oil, all that good omega-3, but it is solely concentrated and solely sourced from the liver of the codfish, you're getting all the extra fat soluble nutrients that are great for brain function, but also the precursor to hormonal balance. So it's like, to me, the perfect food. So if you are taking a fish oil supplement and you are a woman, I usually recommend a cod liver oil supplement.
And you can get them that don't taste bad, or that.
Yeah. Yeah. And you can get them in, capsules and in liquid. And there are certain kinds that are fermented, like pre-fermented before they're encapsulated, and some people tend to digest those better. So it also depends on the state of your digestion, right? Because some people can take them and burp them back up, and that's not pleasant.
So favorite brands, is Nordic Naturals among them?
Yep, Nordic Naturals is among them. Carlson is among them. Green Pastures is among them. Rosita. Yeah.
And what do you recommend for vegetarians, vegans?
Cod liver oil. No. No, you can get DHA and EPAs like from algae, and you can source those.
Is it something to where if people felt like they could make an exception, like I know some, we have some customers that are vegan, but they'll make an exception with the elixirs with honey because they know it's ethically sourced. Is this a situation where we might want to consider making an exception because it's so crucial for our health?
Yes, I believe so, especially if you are suffering with debilitating symptoms, right? I mean, this isn't just like make this exception because it might be good for you, but this is like make this exception because you are home 2 days every month, miserable, right? Maybe something about the nutrition that you're doing isn't working.
And does flaxseed oil hold a candle to any of the other?
It has the omega-3s, and a lot of the animal products, actually, like eggs, meat, and dairy, are high in the omega-6s. So by being vegan and not eating those, you're probably, bringing your ratio more into balance, which, is good. And so if you're feeling good, fine. But if you're not, then there might be something else missing. And what I find with that is usually the fat soluble vitamins that are so crucial to hormonal imbalance, which are the vitamins A, D, and K, which are mostly found in animal products. So they are really hard to source in the same nutrient dense way from vegan sources.
What are you saying?
In other words, it might be hard as a vegan to replicate these vitamins. You can still get them, but they absorb differently in the body than from animal sources. So, almost using them as like a medicine, right? To treat the body in a way if it's suffering. Right. This is assuming that you're not doing well. Right. I'm not suggesting anyone change their philosophies or diet or anything, if it's going well for them. Great. But this is if you're suffering.
Okay.
I have seen in my practice and in my own experience, women with severe endocrine imbalance, including some of these animal products, whether it's, the cod liver oil or a desiccated liver supplement or a bone broth. It doesn't have to be that now all of a sudden they're major carnivores, but that these little adjustments can really, they can be the game changer in their menstrual symptoms. So.
And an idea just jumped in my head. If we go back to fertility and we look at getting off the pill, what do you recommend for understanding your cycle and either getting pregnant and increasing your chances of fertility, or not getting pregnant, avoiding getting pregnant if you're not wanting to get pregnant? Because in the US, it's pretty much just like, take the pill if you don't want to get pregnant. What do you recommend for people to understand their cycles better?
Fertility awareness method is my favorite, which involves like basal body temperature charting. So taking your temperature first thing in the morning, and it involves checking your cervical mucus and checking your cervix for size and dilation. There's like a whole host of different things. And if that's something that's interesting, I definitely recommend working with a fertility awareness method FAM practitioner, which they often do remotely if you don't have someone in your town. But that is like that's a great way for preventing pregnancy and then also achieving pregnancy if you want to. And then being aware, like, so part of what I see as the big problem with the birth control pill is that, like you mentioned, many women are put on it, you know, in their teens because of symptoms, right? Not necessarily for birth control, right? And then they just kind of take it as part of their daily regimen for 15 years until they want to get pregnant. And so I think being a little more conscious about what is the birth control for, and when we can consciously use it as a choice for pregnancy prevention, you know, and then doing that with integrity and knowing the risks associated with it, knowing that birth control pill can deplete, it can facilitate the gut dysbiosis that we talked about, and it can deplete nutrients, especially B vitamins. It inhibits your body's ability to absorb them. So these are all crucial factors to fertility.
Oh my God. So if you're,
Crucial.
I'm just putting the dots together here. So what if you're vegan and you're on the pill and you've kind of got two?
You need to be supplementing with a lot of B vitamins.
Yeah.
For sure. And probiotics and some form of collagen. You can't find a vegan collagen. You can find marine collagen. It doesn't have to be, you know, land animal collagen. So if you're open to that, but yeah, like knowing that this is what the birth control pill can do, and then, you know, upping your reserves while you're on it, making sure you really up your reserves when you get off of it.
Okay, this is something I did not know before. So the birth control pill can deplete your gut flora. And that's
Yes,
a
absolutely.
huge topic of
Yes.
everything today, because none of us have the right gut flora, right? Apparently.
No.
Wow.
Your gut flora and your nutrients, especially B vitamins, those are huge for women, and mood, and, you know, hormone balance and fertility and all of it. So yeah, we need to be better about knowing how to counteract these if we're choosing to go on the birth control pill for birth control reasons, and also knowing these risks might help, you know, make a choice. If you're not on it for birth control reasons, then maybe you don't need to be on it. Or if you'd prefer a more natural approach to birth control, trying another one of those options out there, like fertility awareness method, and IUD is another one. You know, they make
the only thing is you have to be looking or making sure that it's just the copper, because
yes,
what I'm seeing with women today is that they go to the doctor and there's a heavy recommendation for the one that releases hormones. So what's the difference? It's like double whammy there, right?
Yeah, it is. And I haven't gotten a straight answer on that. And I've talked to a lot of GYNs about it because it seems to be the one that is most often. And the reasoning is that it's such a small amount of hormones that it doesn't affect the system. Which I'm like,
why would you? Why would you?
Exactly. And the other theory is that if it's such a small amount of hormones and it stays local to the uterus,
but it doesn't make
impossible
sense, because
the body doesn't work that way.
An IUD already prevents pregnancy.
Yes, an
so
IUD
why
already
would you want to add to the toxic load of the body that would imbalance your body.
I agree. The theory is that it increases the cervical plug so that it like has the extra protection of
0.002%.
Yeah, right, exactly. But
from the 99 point.
Yes, exactly. But
for the 3 days that you're ovulating.
For the 3 days, exactly. 2, right? That you're actually fertile. Okay. Exactly. Yeah. But somehow most of the women who are on that low hormonal IUD end up not getting a period anymore. So to me, that's enough hormone. If it's enough hormone to stop your period, then that's enough hormone to be running through your system. Yeah, most eventually stop menstruating.
Oh my goodness.
With that one. Or if they continue, it's just super light. So it's kind of not that different than the birth control pill, even though it's like lower hormone, right? And they went through this in the 90s. I don't know if you remember when the patch came out, and it was like, well, it's lower hormone because it goes through the skin instead of the digestive system, but it's all still doing the same thing, right? There's really no distinction there. But you're right, the copper IUD actually has 0 hormones and, you know, tends to work well with a lot of women, but it does cause a lot more pain and cramping, or it can. So if you are already presenting with painful periods, it's probably not a good choice until you can get the period pain under control, which brings us back to our original conversation. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So back to our original conversation. We've looked at omega-3s, we've looked at diet, gut flora. Any other
Yes.
tips, or should we dive into herbs?
Yeah, well, just two things with diet that I'd like to highlight. One that isn't popular, but is dairy, that is like huge marker from many different lineages, Chinese medicine included, as a contributing factor to painful periods, whether it's through the prostaglandin cascade or through the stagnation of the local stagnation. It is just a cloying, difficult thing for many people to digest. And if we kind of look at the dairy industry right now, we could see that most dairy that we consume is highly processed.
Mm-hmm.
And the lower fat it is, the more processing it has had, right? If you look at a skim milk, it's not just milk. There's like a bazillion ingredients in it, which is so weird. So it appears as a real food and it is not. It is very processed.
If you're gonna do dairy, do the super duper fatty stuff.
Super duper fatty, raw if you can, and maybe you'll only do well with goat or sheep. But if you are having debilitating, painful periods, I would encourage you to get rid of all dairy for a month and see what happens to your cycle. Be curious enough to give it up for a month, and then you go make the choices for the most real food possible and be very, very particular about that. And then the other thing that I just wanted to share with food that I found really interesting is, so red meat in Chinese medicine, we tend to recommend red meat a lot in small amounts, but as a medicine for women and for their mental health, their emotional health, and also their uterine health. But, red meat is also very inflammatory. It can affect the prostaglandin response. But there's been doing research on the differences between like grass-fed meat and conventional grain-fed meat. So grain-fed meat is fed all of these grains that are producing these oils that raise these omega-6s. So the ratio, like I said, that you want in your food and in your body for omega-6 to omega-3 is 1-to-1.
Okay.
And a good grass-fed meat will be about 4-to-1. So it's still a little bit elevated and you want to be careful, but it's not, but a conventional meat is 21-to-1, right? In that ratio.
Whoa.
So it's not just about the type of food, but also where you source it from. And the same goes for eggs, which I find to be such a nutrient dense food, especially for fertility, but regular conventional store-bought eggs can have a 20-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, which is crazy.
Did you say 20-to-1?
20-to-1. Yes.
Holy moly.
Insane. Okay. Whereas like if you get a pastured, grass-fed, egg, it's almost 1-to-1. It's almost equal. Like that's the difference between the source of our food, right? So we really need to be conscious about this.
Not to digress here on the eggs, but is free range enough or no? You need to look for pasture. And do you need organic? Like which battle are you fighting here with the eggs?
I'm always more fighting the more local, the more free range, more than organic even, because it's like, well, if you give them organic feed, it's not really changing anything. It's the same difference. What you want chickens that are outside, getting sunshine, eating grass, eating bugs. So, to the extent that you can trace whatever brand you're buying, do it. And then, make a decision that, feels right with you. I'm always a fan of local versus, mass produced brands. So if you've got a local egg person.
So for women who are experiencing super painful periods, they could start by eliminating dairy for 1 month, say getting eggs from the local farmer's market, and maybe even taking an omega-3 supplement.
Yes, cod liver oil.
Especially. Cod liver oil.
Yes, that would be a great, great start. And then, so herbally.
Wait, can we talk about a drug first?
Yeah.
Let's talk about drugs. White sugar. How does white sugar affect the cycle in the body?
I mean, it's not great. It's not really good for anything that I know of.
It would just increase inflammation and...
Yeah, it does. It just increases inflammation. And if you're eating too much of it, or refined sugar, so that would be like breads, pastas, and refined flours like breads and pastas, and then white sugars, there may be a blood sugar issue going on, and that affects insulin levels, and insulin is a hormone. So sometimes we have to come in from that way. And I see that more often with PMS-y type symptoms,
Okay.
which can be pain for sure, but more that kind of moodiness, irritability, maybe even like nausea, or, I don't know, just even acne before a period. Like we want to get the blood sugar under control. So yeah, so that's where white sugar would come into play.
Okay.
And finding your balance, right? I'm all about, that's where the curiosity comes in. Like you start to learn what works for you. And like, if you find out you do really well on a no dairy diet, but you just love cheese and you eventually just eat it and you know how you're going to feel, like, fine, you can make that choice. Like, it's not about being perfect. We have to live in this world too. But the more information you have about your body, and same with sugar, like we're probably all going to eat dessert at some point, and have sugar. And like, it's just knowing, okay, well, I haven't even ovulated yet, so maybe I'll process it better. So let's go for it now, or whatever. We have to feed our souls and our spirits too. So yeah, for what that's worth.
Okay. Choose your battles.
Yeah. Yes.
And opt for maple syrup if you can. Okay, herbs.
Exactly. Yeah.
Let's dive into herbs. And are you typically working more with Chinese herbs that people are going to have less familiarity with in terms of even just like the names, or Western herbs, or do you work with a mix of both?
I work with a mix of both, but when it comes to PMS and menstrual pain, I'm working with a private client, I'm almost always doing a Chinese formula. So a constitutional formula that moves, whatever energy I'm trying to move to stop their pain. So that is always key for me. And the Chinese formulas can have anywhere from 12 to 20 herbs in them. They come in a powder, and, they'll take them for a few months for pelvic pain disorders, 3, maybe even 6 months. But the goal being that we're treating the underlying root pattern so that eventually you come off the powder and you can enjoy periods that have a lot less symptoms and you don't need the herbs to have them.
And this is a powder that you're putting into water.
Yes.
Super convenient. So it's not like, the olden days I'd go to see my Chinese doctor and it was like you had to buy that special ceramic pot and then you put in the whole herbs in their little funky packets and then you boil them down for like, I don't know how many hours. It just like took forever. Okay. So those days we've got more convenient solutions.
Yes. Well, there are more. You could still do that if you want to, but now they've done that for you and then freeze dried those concentrations into powdered extracts. And that's typically how I work, because I find it's just so convenient. You can also find herbalists that will boil down those herbs for you and then put them into vacuum sealed packets, and you can just drink them like a juice box or something.
Fabulous.
Yeah. So there's much more convenient ways to get those in. But though for Chinese herbs, you obviously have to go and see someone and get a prescription and get a working constitutional, pattern differentiation. And it's hard. You can't just do that yourself. So that's where I find, Western herbs and supplements can be a really great first line of defense if you want to start experimenting, on your own. Yeah. Do you want me to dive in?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's dive.
My favorite one for pain is going to be ginger. And it's actually shown in clinical trials that a certain amount of it, like a high enough dose, can reduce pain equal to the effects of ibuprofen. So actually buying ginger root, either the powder or the extract, which would be encapsulated in a 500 milligram tablet, if you can find it, and taking that up to 4 times a day during your pain as your pain reliever can be really helpful. And then I would recommend also taking it at least once a day throughout your whole cycle, just as like a preventative leading up to it, and these are all with the caveat that I'm not diagnosing or treating, you got to go into it with your own mind.
Sure. And what do you think about people who like tea? So it's like chopping up a bunch of root and making a tea and drinking 4 cups a day, similar to taking the 500 milligrams? Or are you recommending, if you're really in a painful situation, try to hit it hard with the capsules?
Yeah. If you're like, I wouldn't mind having a little less pain, maybe you do the tea all month. But if you are in a lot of pain and looking to not take as many ibuprofens, then I would go at least for a few months and get that get the encapsulated ginger so that you can make sure you're actually getting, a therapeutic dose. Yeah, as a big one.
And for women who aren't experiencing a lot of pain, drinking a cup of ginger tea every day would be beneficial.
Yeah, great. In general, for Chinese medicine, whatever the pattern is, we always want to increase circulation and increase warmth to the uterus. Those are like our main goals. Even if there's inflammation, it sounds counterintuitive to add heat, but it improves circulation and moves out the toxins, moves out the inflammation and the stagnation there. So all the warming spices are really great. Ginger, cardamom, citrus, especially like the peel, like an orange peel, nutmeg, clove. These are all great warming spices, more with an affinity for the digestive system. So they just kind of help cool the whole thing. If we're wanting to go and warm specifically what we call the lower jiao or the lower abdomen, the pelvic floor, we're looking at black pepper, turmeric, and cinnamon as being more for the lower part.
Okay, so you're saying they're warming spices, but they're actually cooling to the area because they're moving, the warmth is moving the circulation. And so it's like,
yes, they're
toxins and
yes,
stagnancies.
They're not cooling to the area, they're warming to the area, but they will reduce inflammation.
Got it. Right? Okay.
Yep. Which to me sounds like a heat condition, because it is, right? It's hot, swollen, but by moving through that, it soothes the inflammation, even though it's a warming herb.
And what about cramp bark? I always hear about cramp bark. I mean, I know ginger certainly tastes better, but
yeah, it's a little bitter, the cramp bark. Yeah, that's another one that you can try, and you can get it in a tincture form. I don't have as much experience with it because I just find I know the Chinese herbs that work so well for cramps. So I tend to gravitate towards that, but I certainly have clients that are coming to me already taking it, and my Western herbalist friends who swear by it. So it's worth a shot. That's what it's for. It's for helping the uterus.
And then what are some of the Chinese formulas? Are they very specific to the individual?
They're very specific to the individual.
So if you want to experiment on your own, you can look at the Western herbs. And if you really want to specifically target exactly what is the root cause in your own body, you can use Chinese medicine with a practitioner.
Yes.
You wouldn't want to like let somebody loose with Chinese formulas by themselves.
No.
So many factors, that the heat and the cold and the
and what works for somebody might not work for the other. It's not like I'm giving the same, reduce pain in the pelvic floor to every woman. I'm giving them constitutional formulas that work with that piece. But yeah, so, trying the ginger, trying, the warming spices in your food or in tea, doing the cod liver oil. I also love magnesium. It's such a nice, gentle, muscle relaxant. So you can take 400 to 800 milligrams of that during your cycle, maybe a little bit before. Glycinate, magnesium glycinate is going to be the most absorbable and with the least side effects. So that's a nice choice there. Also, Vitex or chaste berry can be helpful too. It's, a lot of people think of it as a like an estrogen and progesterone balancer. So especially if there's no underlying, pelvic dysfunction going on, and there's just like a slight hormonal imbalance, taking that throughout the month, either in tincture or capsule form, can be helpful for some people.
And so for those people that want to like dive deeper, I mean, living in Phoenix, I've really tried to search for I can't say there's like a amazing acupuncturist here. I always get acupuncture in New York City. What would you recommend, or, I mean, because you can do sessions via Skype or digital. Yes. How does that work when you're not able to do the pulse reading? Is it just through like symptomology and tongue?
It is. Yeah. Tongue and discussion and history and, hearing, their symptoms and, I can do facial diagnosis via like a Skype call or a video call, and getting to know them. There's lots of ways we absorb, constitutional factors from even like tone of voice can be one. But, oftentimes we could get pretty far in something like PMS and menstrual pain with nutrition, supplement, and herbal intervention. But I'll also recommend acupuncture. It is so great for those symptoms. So if you are suffering with it, I would strongly encourage you to find someone locally. And, if they're not like, I don't know, the best or whatever, to try them anyways, because just the acupuncture, moving your energy, will directly improve circulation to the pelvic floor. And that alone could do so much for your symptoms. So it's worth looking for. I always try and give referrals. I know a lot of people all over the US, so I try and refer to them when it works out, but otherwise asking people, who they like, and trying to find recommendations, and then also calling clinics and talking to the acupuncturist. Most acupuncturists will talk to you for 15 to 20 minutes before you actually make an appointment, and ask them, like, is this something you treat? What is your success rate? Like, how quickly do you think I can see results? Like, ask them and get a feel for, how they answer will help you either feel confident in trying them or not. And then you call and do the same thing with someone else. So,
Great advice.
you can do your own little self research as you're selecting your team locally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And so if someone wanted to work with you, how does that work with the herbs when you identify the formulas that they need?
Mm-hmm. Well, it's trial and error. So I'm usually working with someone over a period of months, especially with cycle disorders. So I'll prescribe some sort of formula for about a month. And that gets put in through a pharmacy that I work with in Colorado, and they create the formula. The client will fill the formula with them, and then they ship it to the client, and then we'll adjust it as needed every month. And occasionally, depending on the cycle imbalance, we can do pre-ovulation and post-ovulation formulas if we really need to affect different systems for those different energy times.
Wow.
It just depends on the case and the severity.
And I know we have to wrap up soon, but is there any last little bites of wisdom that you might have about the different cycles or the phases in our cycle, and looking at like yin-yang energy and things we should do or not do during different parts of the cycle?
Yeah, definitely there is. So my favorite piece is that the menstruation point, so those like 5 to 7 days when you're bleeding, is when yang is becoming yin. And it's kind of like when the intuition is highest. I feel like it's kind of like the veil between your spiritual and cognitive self is really thin, and you can tap into a lot of your own inner wisdom and your own inner guidance. So I really encourage people to do a lot of journaling, make time for stillness, make time for meditation during menstruation, and see what comes in, and just be really open.
I noticed the first day of my period, it's very, very hard for me to be around crowds or people or groups. I have to isolate. Otherwise, it just becomes way too stimulating.
Yes, totally. Yes, I agree. I'm the same way. And even sometimes I'll notice too, I'll like be thinking about someone and then they'll call, like stuff that I'm like, it happens more in this. It's like I'm somehow tuned in. I just, I don't have like psychic harnessing abilities, but like there's just some more, you're more plugged in to that kind of realm. And so use that and listen to your body. And then, the yin phase we actually move into, which is pre-ovulation, so that's the yin phase, which traditionally we think of as like quiet and introspective, but it's actually not. It's yin in relation to the fact that we're developing an egg to ovulate, right? So we want that to be nourished and warm. And so our body's kind of already doing that, but we tend to express as more yang. So it's a great time for being out and about and social and scheduling speaking engagements. Like all of this is going to feel more in tune with your body in a pre-ovulation state, right? Not that you can't do it in other times, but this is like, there's energy supporting this factor, and ovulation kind of being the culmination of that, right? Higher libido, higher vibrancy, you might be able to go on 4 hours of sleep and feel okay. Like these energies are just in bigger play. And then as you transition from ovulation toward menstruation, we're in like that yang phase, which is, traditionally thought of as more that energetic time, and there's more movement in the uterus as the blood builds up, as potentially there's implantation if you're trying to get pregnant, but there's more of that yang energy happening in the pelvis, and we tend to feel more yin. So we need more warmth, we need more stillness. It's a great time for like research or continuing education, or getting tasks done, building like foundations, getting systems in order, like just kind of organizing and being there, versus like out and about and like gripping and grinning and whatever, meeting people. It's like more about that kind of behind the scenes stuff, if we were to translate it to the energies of your day, and then kind of moving into menstruation where you're more intuitive. So that's the menstrual cycle based on yin and yang.
Fascinating. It's so fascinating.
Yeah.
I love that. Thank you so much for your time today. Any last little thing that we didn't cover that we really need to give people in mind that we didn't cover?
Oh, I feel like I could talk about this forever, but I think we got a good amount.
We got a lot. That is a lot.
I think the ultimate thing is just that, your endocrine system is wise, your menstrual cycle is wise. It's a whole nother conversation, but if you're more towards menopause, that is wise. Like there is a wisdom to our body, and your symptoms are a signal. And, I encourage you to just cultivate curiosity around figuring it out, and, get support if you need it. If you're really uncomfortable, it can be overwhelming. A lot of these hormonal symptoms are not just like little things that if you think about, they'll go away. Like there might be real things that need to be supported and worked on from a Western medicine or a holistic medicine standpoint. So get support and remain curious, and be beneath it all, trust your body.
Speaking of support, if you are interested in doing work with Erin, or she also has a 30-minute complimentary session, which I would definitely take her up on, you're going to get really busy. I mean, I know you're already really busy, but just saying, you're going to have like a waiting list really long. You probably do. But if you're interested in that, we'll post all that information on the podcast page at LOTUSWEI.com. And for more information about Erin, her website is erinborbet.com, and her last name is spelled Borbet. And we'll have all of that juicy info on the podcast page as well. So thank you again so much, Erin. Such a huge fountain of rich and important information. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to The Flower Lounge. I'm Katie Hess, and we'll be releasing a new podcast every Wednesday. If you like what you heard, or you know someone who might be touched by our conversation, share it with them. And don't forget to subscribe. To find out what your favorite flowers mean about you, take the quiz at LOTUSWEI.com.